research figures talk about 30% to 50% disengagement. They're at school, but they're not engaged. And that's a critical thing. But there's also a large number of people who are refusing to go to school or come to school when they feel like it.
You're listening to Around the School Table, hosted by me, Steve Davis, and proudly powered by Zuno Suite. We'll be bringing together the many voices shaping primary and secondary education across Australia, from principals and teachers to education thought leaders and system innovators. Whether you're in the classroom, the staff room, or the boardroom, this is your podcast to be informed, inspired, and connected. Today on Around the School Table, we welcome David Loader OAM, Chair of the Institute for Educational Reform, or IER, a pioneering initiative that's tackling student disengagement in years 7 to 9. It's backed by the Alivo Institute and led alongside Research Director Dr. Jeff Masters, AO, former ASA CEO. Now, with 32 years as principal at Methodist Ladies College and Wesley College, where he pioneered one-to-one laptops in 1989, David challenges outdated metrics. He champions student agency, and he rethinks EdTech's role in bridging the chasm between curriculum and curiosity. His vision for future-ready schools signals resistance as healthy, not a deficit, and he urges systemic trust over compliance. I hope you'll enjoy the chat. David, welcome to Around the School Table.
Thank you very much, Steve.
You're the chair of the Institute for Education Reform and working alongside, as I mentioned, people like Dr. Jeff Masters. In simple terms, what is IER trying to change in Australian education?
Okay, let's start with its name, Institute of Educational Reform. We thought that encapsulated what we wanted to do, so we called it that. My wife said immediately, "So you're doing a jail, are you?" No, not. Bad choice maybe, but we've now got it and we're staying with it. 30 years ago, we were founded as an organisation. Actually, it was the Institute of De Bono initially, and then has gone through some changes. But 2 years ago, we made the change to the Institute of Educational Reform because we were concerned about disengagement by students in schools, which we thought was not being recognised. The metrics that are used talk about PISA, they talk about this, VCE results. But no learning happens unless there's engagement between students and teachers or between students and the academic program. So that's why we're there. We were really surprised, you could even say dismayed, that the research figures talk about 30% to 50% disengagement. They're at school, but they're not engaged. And that's a critical thing. But there's also a large number of people who are refusing to go to school or come to school when they feel like it. That's pretty much the description of who we are.
It's interesting because I do a lot of work with small businesses and over many years have referred to a thing called presenteeism, where people are present at work, but they're really absent. And that's that first cohort of students you're talking about who are there, but they're just not engaged. I think you could almost use that as an umbrella term.
I like it. Being present, yes, because there's no metrics currently for engagement, and we're trying to work on that. And in fact, in fairness to the government, they're prepared to work with us.
We're going to come to that a little bit later in our chat. Before we do, though, I mean, you spent 17 years as principal at Methodist Ladies College. You introduced one computer per student. And at that point when you did it, that was well ahead of its time. What did that teach you about engagement, about agency, about trust?
I love being a school principal because you have freedom. And when I meet a school principal who's scared to take any initiative, I say you should resign. You're missing the role. The role is for someone to take initiative, to reach out and to look. So I loved it. I may or may not have been successful with this, but I think very successful. We started a program throughout the world, essentially. We were the first. So Melbourne is on the first list, at least in terms of computers. Now, we saw them as a convivial tool we didn't see it as a machine or something like that. We saw it as a knowledge machine. So this is a place where you can store your knowledge. This is a place where you can develop your knowledge. This is a place where you can interact your knowledge with other people's knowledge. So it was a philosophy, and a lot of my critics, and there were many, and they were quite cruel, saw it as a publicity stunt. They didn't see it as what it was, an educational change, a new paradigm in education. They saw it as simply machines. And so when they finally decided they had to copy them, they didn't really get it right because they hadn't borrowed the philosophy, they just borrowed the computers. And I think to some extent, we're still not getting it right. I can't believe you could say to a business, you can't have computers. I can't believe at home, everyone doesn't have a computer, whether it's a phone or some other object. And why would we say schools should take them out? Surely they are there and they're really important. But at the time when we did this, we were trying to say we are basing our education on books, pens, and pencils. But what about music? What about creating a whole range of artistic sort of stuff? What about statistics and databases? What about being able to communicate? So we saw this as a significant change to the schooling. And in fact, we said, if you put all the computers in a computer lab, which some people were doing, and we saw said that was an immune reaction to keep the computers out of school. So we were pretty aggressive in our introduction, and we had a concept of substantial change in the way that schools might operate. So 36 years later,
at that time, I was trying to put myself in your shoes. You've unveiled one computer per student. I suppose part of you would have expected some flack, but was there a part of you that felt like Gutenberg showing off the first printed brochure or book and having it thrown back in his face saying, no, this is too much for the human brain?
Well, maybe back then the churches and some of the kings and a few other people were vociferous and powerful in their opposition. But I don't know why it created such a concern. I remember one parent said to me much later in the process when we had Excel sheets, he said, I'm an accountant. I will never have Excel in my business. So what happened to him, I don't know.
No. Now, the Victorian government, it reports improving performance, and yet your research shows that only a third of students are engaged, about half feel a sense of belonging. Are we just measuring the wrong things?
I think you're right on the spot. We are measuring the wrong things because learning starts with engagement. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And in fact, our involvement, our change of direction as a body in Elevo was brought about by a government press release that said, we see a good improvement in students' attitude to school, 1.6% improvement. And I thought, oh, well, that's something. But when I looked behind that figure, they were talking about a score of 46.9% of students were engaged with school. That's less than 50%. Any school mark that's less than 50 is considered a failure. And they were praising themselves rather than saying, look, hey, this is a problem, we need to address it. So that's how we got involved. That's how we've got our mojo. Our purpose is to ensure that no student is failed by the education system and that every student is set up for success. I know that's sort of highfalutin and a broad goal, but we're talking about doing this for nothing. We're not going there to set up a business or anything like that. And we also said we wanted to foster a student-centred education system because at present, schools expect students to conform to the school. And we're saying you've got to conform to where the student is. There's no point in trying to teach a student year 8 maths if they failed in grade 5. You've got to actually address where they are in grade 5. And in any class in year 7, for example, there would be students at least 3 grades ahead, at least 3 grades behind. So how do you teach to that sort of range? It's very difficult. So we think that you can make some changes that will not cost a lot of money, but we could actually reorganise the school in such a way that we can help those students that are 3 grades behind, and we can stimulate the students that are 3 grades ahead, and of course deal with the students that are average. We had a gorgeous student at one of our round tables who came later and said Dr. Jeff Marshall had Marshall had spoken at the conference, and they were reviewing afterwards, and this year 7 girl said, Jeff was pretty good. And I thought, Jeff, oh, yeah, okay. Yes, he was good. And she said, I now understand. I couldn't understand why some students were bored and others were disengaged. She said, now I understand. They couldn't understand it. And the others were, we did the work before, we understand it. So it was very interesting to see that sort of flash. Now, if we could have the department see that flash, we'd be going somewhere.
This is a delicate topic because I loved school, but in latter years, I have had my appetite for history piqued by some amazing podcasts that take slow, thoughtful dives into parts of history. I'm actually currently running a show as part of South Australia's History Festival because I am enamoured of the whole field, and I regret that at school it just seemed to be hermetically sealed little capsules with dates, and I couldn't land my boat on those islands. So this, to me, might fall somewhere on that spectrum of engagement. I got through, I ticked the right things, but I didn't have my heart connected. Do teachers carry this? Is this curriculum? How do we save disciplines or areas like that to help with this engagement quest that you are on?
Well, to you, I would say, why only have one history subject? Why don't you have 2 or 3? Why don't you propose which areas you'd like to study? And we'll sit down and talk about how you can be evaluated, because clearly there has to be a structure. You have to be proceeding through things and so on. And actually, you can be in the same history class as students that are doing other histories. It doesn't have to be. So this notion that we've got that the teacher has to teach you and that students are empty vessels waiting to be filled, and that the content that you need, we know it comes from heaven, so therefore it's important, as opposed to saying it's the getting interested, getting involved, pursuing, chasing ideas is the educational product.
Now, this does come back to what we're talking about most deeply, because there's talk of students talking about a chasm between what they're taught and what they want to learn. Can we just take this a little bit further? Because had you sat me down when I was there and said, what do you want to learn? I don't know what I don't know. I hadn't had enough life yet to understand what areas of history pique me. So how do we honour that, close the gap without losing rigour along the way?
Yeah. So you've identified the fact that teachers need to introduce students into new ideas when they first come for science, how exciting they are about it, and does that excitement continue? Do they capture that excitement? I did first year geology many thousands of years ago when they were talking about a theory called continental drift. And I don't believe any student in that lecture theatre believed it. I certainly didn't. And I was up against him. I said, how can the earth move like this? And he was arguing a case. That was real involvement in science, because that he was saying, well, you prove your case and I'm proving mine. You were there. So when you get told that you put sulfuric acid on something and it happens, that's interesting, and fuzz and so on. But it hasn't really got you there. But if you say, I'm going to make some fireworks, would you want to make some fireworks? Or could we? But anyway, I think the point I want to make is that students sit in class and they say, where will I use this? What's the point of it? I'm not interested in it. So that's where they are. That's the curriculum is somewhere else. Skills like financial literacy, conflict resolution, navigating for job markets, rarely taught. Connections with what they're concerned about, which is I'm looking at years 7 to 9, identity, friendship, social issues, creativity, technology, they're not really addressed either. We've got this concept of a curriculum. Okay, we want to introduce them to science. We want them to be in languages. We want them into history. We want them into understanding society. But maybe the big topic on the media today ought to be the big topic in the classroom. What does the budget mean? What is its implications? How do you put this together? You're not coming with a predetermined curriculum that's going to fit everyone. You're saying it's about learning. There's a number of steps to get learning, and it doesn't have to be a path.
I want to bring some of your words back to you.
Oh, good.
I've got a quote where you said, disengagement is a reaction to the system. It's not a flaw in students. I think that picks up from what we're just talking about. What do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of the problems in schooling is often put back to students. They're not force them to come to school, force them to listen, give them good construction. Or the problem is with the teachers. They're lazy, they're not involved, they're not doing good lessons, they're to this. Or it's with the schools, they're not really addressing it. It's very easy to put the fault out. And I'm saying the problem is not the teacher, the student, the principal, the parent. It's about the system. The system is not actually gathering those students up and taking them forward. It's not interacting with them. It's not reaching them. And so they're sitting on one side of a chasm, and the teachers, not by their choice, I have to say, are on the other, because there's also this fear for teachers because it's a system of accountability, and you have to teach all this content, and now they say you have to do it our way, and we will assess that. So where is the freedom for the teacher to be experimental, to be enterprising, to be personal?
I think we've just found where the tectonic plates are. I mean, try who can push them? And my heart has been with the teachers as we've talked about this, because you've whipped up my excitement. I wish I could be a child again and go through the system and experience this ideal that you've talked about. But what do teachers need that the current system isn't providing them?
Well, I think there's one thing they need: some freedom and some respect. And I fear that two of those are not there. There's an accountability structure called 2.0, if someone wants to pursue it. We've initiated and requested a research on it. So we'll be writing about it for our website. Our website's going to contain critical articles, both for and against. We're not going to be biased. We're going to have student case studies where you can look at the students. We've got 4 up already. We're going to have school case studies. And the school case studies have caused some problem because not everyone wants to be visible, and yet their websites are very visible. So we have a situation, and yet the strange thing is, so that's we're talking, that's IER, Institute of Education Reform, with the executive in the education department, and they're saying to us, we're prepared to work with you. We understand that there's a problem about engagement. Now, I initially thought this is not right. This is just calm down, David. Don't take it at its face value. But at present, there is a willingness, and I'm not sure where it's going to go. Because, it's logic to say that, well, let's take some of the examples. For example, if you're a student at school, you'll be marked according to the average for your age. Now, if you're behind that last year, you're probably going to be behind it this year and behind it. So you are forever doomed to have a failure rate. And you go away leaving the school saying, I'm a failure, I'm not going to make it. What's the outcome for that? Probably a student looking for a job, a student looking for a group in which they might be a member, and I'm not going to say what they are. So there's a big responsibility on a school to reach out to every student, to give them a base upon which they can work. And I think we're not doing that. And engagement is where we start, not some other PISA or something else.
So as far as teachers are concerned, you're saying it's a little bit up the chain. We actually need the system to take this into account first. Yes.
Yes. So if the system changed, then students and principals and students might well be able to cooperate and get further.
Still juggling forms the old-fashioned way? Say hello to Student Forms by Zuno. You can create, collect, and manage all your student forms online in one simple, secure platform. Save time, stay organised, and quick access everything you need, anytime. Visit zuno.com.au and see how Student Forms by Zuno can work for your school.
Now, I run these interviews. I love them because I loved school, but I'm not an educator. So I need you to just expand on the model I do, we do, you do. Models like that are widely used. Where do they help? Where do they limit curiosity and initiative?
I'm the wrong person to ask. I hate it. The idea that a year 8, year 9, 10 student sits there and the teacher says, this, I model it, now we do it, then you do it. What does that say to the student? It says, you're an empty vessel to be filled. It doesn't say you're an enterprising young person with a point of view, with a direction, where you can take agency. That's the other thing I think is really important, is agency. Agency is about not just listening to and say, get feedback, but inviting participation. So I reckon principals need agency because they're restricted. Teachers need agency because they're restricted. And of course, students are there. So there's a lot more dialogue in the research papers about agency now, the ability to take action for yourself. So a classroom where students and teachers were planning, maybe not necessarily for the whole class, but for individuals, rather than the teacher doing all the preparation, all the teaching. You know, that first classroom with the laptops was really an interesting classroom. And the critics that we invited to go through the school, when they met the kids, they didn't necessarily say it, but they were very impressed because the classroom, the kids weren't necessarily in separated desks. They could be lying on the floor. They were usually in groups. They were definitely communicating and they were definitely helping each other. Now, that's a pretty idyllic classroom, isn't it? And that's what it was like. But now, of course, the technology and everything's moved on. But, you know, classrooms are still individual chairs and tables. And when we gave students some drawing exercises, draw the school how you feel about school. They had jail windows. They had individualized, separated. You didn't get to talk. And then we did I'll show you this. Can you see that?
Yes, this makes for great radio, but we've got a diagram that you're holding up, yes?
It was a result of we did a round table, and it talked about the disengagement challenge where the students were being processed through a factory type thing, and they're isolated and they're sort of chained. This was actually done by a machine. We gave them a 30-page report, and this is what they gave us back. So you can't knock that. And on this side, you've got the green tree growing, and you've got students communicating. You've got cooperation, student agency where they're taking initiative, green grass, and also certificates of success. I know it was very bad. I'm sorry about that. A picture on
a radio show. However, you have got a habit of kicking up the stones to look what's underneath because, yes, you've referred to the empty vessel model a couple of times, and I've just had a little holiday time with my daughters who are 15 and 17. One voluntarily asked if I had any philosophy books, and I gave her Philosophy, the Basics, and most of that trip was hurt. We were talking about the problem of good and evil. We were talking about ethical dilemmas. And at dinner, they hounded me to come up with philosophical things we could discuss. I was shocked by the hunger they had, the willingness to engage in this, which doesn't kind of match that empty vessel model.
And isn't it a put down to the kids that they don't recognise that they can do this? I remember sitting with a group of students once too at boarders, sitting around their boarding table, and they wanted to talk about really interesting topics, not trivial things. So I think we misunderstand.
You have also mentioned technology in your discussion thus far. Is technology part of the solution, and what role do you think Australian edtech companies have to play in this, in both practice and policy?
Well, we can see some really bad examples of edtech, so let's not say everyone's good, because we know they're not. It's a bit like cigarettes. I couldn't believe initially that when people told me that they added to cigarettes something that would make them want to come back and have more. And I think that can happen with educational computing. Certainly when we started, the big ed techs came in and said, we can solve your problems. We can combine all these laptops. You can have a teacher looking at what the students are doing. I said, I don't want the teacher looking at what the students are doing. I don't want that to happen. I want the students to take control of their own learning. So there's a place. But, I like Claude. He and I, I'm not sure it's a he or she, are good friends. And he compliments me when I ask a question. And that's deep, yes. He said, that might take longer, and so on, rubbishry.
Yes.
But for some people, it could be a bonding, and that bonding might be more important than a human bonding. So therein lies the problem. But on the other hand, I said to a parent recently, I was trying to get them to submit a case study of their child, but they didn't want to do that. But she was saying to me, we got behind in maths, seriously behind. So I looked for an app, and we sat down with this app, and we, in 3 months, did 3 years of maths. Now, there is a school in America, I don't know whether it's good or bad, but this school in America says, we will do English, maths, and I'm not sure what the third one is, in 2 hours on computers in the morning, and the afternoon we're going to do group sessions of your choice. Now, so they're saying they can cope with the content taught by machines, but you've got to see what's happening there. We've got to have a better respect for it than perhaps our social media people who've allowed certain things to happen and haven't stopped it. So I'm positive. I can't believe this current push to take computers out of the school. I do believe there's a very important reason to control them, and it should be for the best interest of the kids, not otherwise.
I've also heard that you've said that the real concern isn't the resisting student. What worries you the most are the passive students. Because they don't make a noise. They don't cause any friction in the system. What does that tell you about how schools are handling behaviour, which is all connected to this question of engagement?
I think this is really interesting. I'm going to tell a naughty story about my school experience where we used to try and control the students' dress when they left the school. And I was down on duty on one day and I saw this student who was just dreadful. And I walked over and she said to me, Mr. Loader, don't bother. And I said, okay, what should I not bother about? She said, you're going to talk to me about my uniform. And I said, yes, I was actually. She said, don't bother. She said, you're seeing me tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for a much more serious matter. I really would like to know where that student is now. She should be Prime Minister of Australia, really. She had initiative. She was not afraid. She knew what she wanted to do. I don't know why she was choosing to act out on the uniform. We try as best we could to give some freedom. But so what are we there about? That's the engagement. That's the good student for me. The student that doesn't speak and sits in a corner, okay, they may get the top VCE mark. They may not, because they may be. Right, let me go there. Let's ask this question. What kind of student?
Here we go.
Sorry, your podcast people can't see your eyes getting bigger and your big naughty smile. Okay, so I'll give you 4 possibilities. Okay, you can have a passive student that we've been talking about, or you can have one that questions everything, sort of says a resistor, if you like, or we could have an achiever. They're probably the ones that teachers like best, parents like best, but there's a further one, which is an explorer. And an explorer says, well, yeah, maybe, but I want to go there, I don't want to go there. But in general, the explorer will have covered the work and be going beyond that. So your dear daughters, which role would you like them to have? I mean, you don't. That's unfair because they may listen. Next door neighbours' daughters, what would you like them to have? To be a listener, achiever, a resistor, or an adventurer?
At some point, it depends on where I am in my own journey.
Ah, yes.
Because the passive person is just easy. I can be as disengaged as they are, and we all get to the finish line and we stumble across. The resistor who's asking questions, if I've got lots of energy and if I sense the questions are earnestly asked,
oh, yes,
I would really relish and enjoy those things. If I find it's just game saying, that would become tiresome very quickly. The high achiever will make me look good. I'd always have a sneaking worry that they've been answering the questions well, like running across the stepping stones on a raging creek. What happens if they slip? Are they going to be resilient? They might slip one day. They might have, I don't want to downplay the effort they've put in, but has there been the luck of the draw in the way the questions have fallen? And we don't know yet. And then the last one, the explorer, I mean, all things being equal, that's where I sit. I'm of that. I'm cut from that cloth. Again, if I had the energy, if I had the resources, if I didn't have a system breathing down my neck, the other day, we pulled up and my daughter wanted to play something in the car and I had other things I had to get to for a meeting and I had to curtail them. It's the same with the explorer student. I would have pressures on me that may not allow me to give them the space for that latitude. So I haven't answered your question with an emphatic answer, but I think it's going to be different depending on my plight as the teacher.
Okay, now the teacher does have constraints of time and of curriculum, but are they real constraints? Should those constraints be there? Or could we free up the whole system if we started thinking differently about the role of the school? And in fact, just even you talked about philosophy. I think it should be in the school, but it's not. French students are significantly different because of their knowledge of philosophy, in my opinion.
Ultimately, the explorer would be a champion to have in my midst, but that resistor with the questions, if they were earnest, I think it's one of those two is the ones I'd like. And yes, wouldn't it be great? I am on your side, David. I really wish we had this utopia that you're exploring, and that might sound pejorative to dub it that. It doesn't have to be, and you've signalled that there are noises from the system that say they're open to exploring this. Let's hope some traction can be gained. In closing, can we look 10, 15 years in the future? What does a truly engaging, future-ready school look like, and what role do students play in shaping it?
Oh, I think that's a separate podcast. I'd love to do that. I think there are so many notions about what a school is. Is a school a place? Is it an idea? Is it a community? We can go through is it a parking lot because, people want the kids minded? We can go through the images of all those, right? We can go through and say, what are the outcomes? And it's very hard today to say what the students are going to meet when they leave school, particularly if they're in 7, 8, 9. That world out there, after AI has had its go at it, is going to be a very different employing field. It could be that the best places to be employed would be in apprenticeships in practical fields, but who knows what the field is going to be. So the notion of utopia I dismiss because we would have a good conversation on a platform, because utopia sort of writes it off, as you say, but in fact it is feasible and possible. But it does involve letting go of some of the restrictions that we currently have. But you asked about what kind of schools. The one I want to propose is a residential school for every student. At least 6 months, not a military camp, not a monastery either, But a residential program, now we introduced those at MLC as well. I reckon that was more significant than the computers in terms of initiative. And we put 8 students in a house with no adults, but adult supervision in the community. And we took out the curriculum. Now, that was fought by the academics in the school. But when the students came back, they were so impressed that there had been some changes in some respect. And also it was Year 9, which is difficult students. They might not have missed them too much for some schools in any case. So I asked Claude before I came here today, how much does the Victorian government spend on education? And according to Claude, they spend 15 billion. Now, you can't tell me that we can't reallocate some of that money. We perhaps don't build any more comprehensive schools. We start thinking about alternatives. But the possibility that you did some recycling and you gave some homeschooling. Now, if people are working from home in Victoria now, so they can look after their own children, they don't have to be sent away for supervision. They may not want to do it, but they could. So you could build a school system that is a combination of a whole range of things. It could have apprenticeships in it. It could have involvement in like arts, like in pottery or drawing, or serious involvement in particular things of interest to the students. The concept that all things have to be the same is something that we have to break out of. We are not all the same, and we can't be dealt with the same. So creativity is definitely possible, and we are not doing well, no matter what you say. If you look at the measurements, attendance has dropped, school refusals have increased. I think Grattan said that the average, what did they say, 89% of students is our number have gone down. It's too late to put the stats out, but a large number of students. So we're saying we've also got all these problems of house invasions, kids on the streets. We have a case to look at change. This is not good enough. In fact, we have commissioned a study on the economic consequences of what's happening, and we'll have that available in 2 months. It's quite a difficult assignment, but someone said they can do it. So why are we persisting with one school fits everyone? It's just not right. And the democratic system that says we give every student the same amount of time may sound good, but that giving that time to the student is useless if they're 3 grades behind or 3 grades ahead. That's not fairness. There's no equity in that.
I'll finish with 3 things. Firstly, to our dear listener, who is more than likely an educator, I hope you felt honoured during this. I think you would have been. I'd love that idea of residential school for 6 months. I'd love to do a separate one on that called Dead Poet Society versus Lord of the Flies. And
good. Yes.
and David, if the powers that be allow us to look at utopia grounded, a way to come back and have that vision expounded on more would be fascinating. I am sure we'll have the links to your resources in the show notes that go with this podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having this chat. David Loader, thank you for being part of Around the School Table.
And thank you, Steve, for such energy and interaction.